So let's go ahead and take a look at our opener here. And this hand, it's a little bit weird. So we've got a couple of cyclers, essentially. Mishra's Bauble and Street Wraith. And so the question is, do we want to keep this knowing that we don't immediately have a way to play Death Shadow? But I do think we want to keep, because we've got an artifact here and a creature and potentially an instant and a land, so we can get to Delirium pretty easily. And so a lot of what this deck is about is being able to sequence your plays. So we're definitely going to play the Mishra's Bauble here. And we can actually sacrifice it to target ourselves. So we can look at our top card here. So we see it's a land, which is not a card we want to draw. So if it was a card we wanted to draw, we would go ahead and cycle the Street Wraith right away and draw that land. But now, since it's not a card we want, we can just go ahead, pop the Polluted Delta. Blood Crypt is normally the fast land, or the shock land you get right away. It's probably the most important of them, just because the black and red spells there's more black and red cards than there are green, and then there's white cards on the board. So I'm just going to go ahead, cycle the Street Wraith right now. And there's actually not even that many red cards in the deck either. It's mostly black cards. We've got Goyfs, we've got Traverses, so kind of an even mix of red and green, but you really want double black for cards like Liliana. So not anything else we can do here, so just going to pass the turn. We actually don't even know what our opponent is playing at this point. But it feels like we've done a reasonable amount just by Mishra's Bobbling and by Street Wraithing. And so we're already at 3 card types. But here's an Inquisition of Kozilek. That's actually going to be pretty good against us right here, because it's probably going to go after the Traverse. And since our opponent has led on a Water Grave, we're likely to be up against a control deck. So, yeah, it's going to take the Traverse, and we may be put into a situation where we don't have enough threats to pressure our opponent. So, hopefully that's not what's going on. So, once again, I'm going to play out the Mishra's Bauble. I like targeting ourselves again. So, it's a Godless Shrine on top. Alright, well, we definitely don't want that. Right, so we're going to go ahead and now sacrifice the Verdant Catacombs. But to be honest, this is just not where this deck wants to be. We got Inquisitioned, so the Traverse was our way to get Death Shadow into play. So I'm just going to go ahead and put the Stomping Ground into play tap, because we're not immediately playing Death Shadow. We don't have one yet. So we may have to try to play a longer game against our opponent. And the Secluded Glen means we are up against Faeries. So this should be interesting. Not a typical modern deck, but definitely a deck. Faeries, respectable choice. And we're going to be probably Thoughtseizing our opponent this turn. But I want to just kick off the turn by cycling the Street Wraith. And once again, there's a land. So this deck is only playing 18 lands. We've drawn quite a few of them. And beyond having drawn quite a few of them, we've seen a couple of them on top with these Mishra's Baubles that we've been forced to shuffle away. So not an ideal situation. And it looks like our opponent's hand is pretty amazing here. So Ancestral Vision, a couple removal spells, Snapcaster, Spell Snare. So I'm gonna take the Go for the Throat, because the reason why I'm taking this card is it's the cleanest way our opponent can answer a Death Shadow, and that's that's basically our way to win the game at this point. Slaughter Pact can't kill a Death Shadow. Spell Snare, no. So if our opponent had 4 lands, Snapcaster plus Go for the Throat would do it, but right now our opponent's only on 2 lands, so I'm going to take the Go for the Throat, knowing full well that we are going to need to draw better in our next turn or two in order to have a chance here. But cards like Ancestral Vision, they're not that relevant in our opponent's hand right now. And there's that 3rd land, so our opponent's pretty close to having Snapcaster plus Go for the Throat. Our opponent could also even Snapcaster Mage Inquisition us, which wouldn't really be that great. So it looks like it's just going to be suspend Ancestral Vision, pass the turn. We have the option here of sacrificing the Bloodstained Mire. So I am going to do that to thin the deck out a little bit. Sure, we'll get a Godless Shrine off the fetch. And there's a Traverse, so that was one of our best draws. Basically, Traverse and Death Shadow itself were our best draws. So I am going to Traverse here with 4 card types in the graveyard. Find a Death Shadow. So we're really hoping now that our opponent doesn't immediately peel that 4th land to be able to go Snapcaster Mage plus Go for the Throat. We have a Gore Clan Rampager in our hand, so we can give this Death Shadow Trample. So that's definitely something to be aware of in this situation. Our opponent's at 15, still a pretty high life total. So, alright, here's a Snapcaster Mage. So it looks like our opponents just didn't find the 4th land, first of all, which is good. Alright, never mind. Our opponent is targeting the Go for the Throat, so our opponent almost certainly does have the 4th land. Or no, sorry. My fault. It's targeting the Inquisition, okay. Thought I saw something else. Wasn't the case, so now the Inquisition is going ahead and targeting us. So we're clearly gonna respond with Fatal Push. So the question is just, do we kill a Fairy Rogue or a Snapcaster? I'm gonna go after the Snapcaster. And we're gonna let the Inquisition resolve. So we show a hand now of Gore Clan Rampager and a Verdant Catacomb. So we have 2 fetch lands, which means we can deal ourselves 6 damage. Or rather 4 damage, I should say. We can get an Overgrown Tomb, but I believe that's the last shock land left in the deck. So our opponent's just going to pass the turn, which I think is a smart move. So I'm just going to untap here. Drew a Wooded Foothills. So even if we had another Shockland in our deck, we could bring ourselves down to 3, make the Death Shadow a 10/10. This would only be 14. And then we would die on the backswing. So I think our opponent's just going to chump here. Looks like a double chump, so we're just going to let that happen. And I think we just have to pass the turn and try to set up Rampager next turn. So this was probably another big draw step. The Ancestral does keep ticking down at this point. And there's another one getting suspended. We know about the Spell Snare. But beyond that, we can't really afford to play around too much here. So I think I'm gonna... So if we sack, get the Overgrown Tomb, that would put us down to 6. The Verdant Catacombs could take us down to 5. The Wooded Foothills could take us down to 4. So that would make the Death Shadow a 9/9 plus the Rampager. I think we do wanna go ahead and get the Overgrown Tomb no matter what. So let's go ahead, get the Overgrown Tomb out of our deck, and take the 2 off of it. Here's a Mishra's Bauble. Okay. So we can go, make the Death Shadow a 9/9, and then move in on the Rampager here, which I think we do. I think we go ahead and make this play. So just get some basics out of our deck. And this is all of the lands, by the way, in the deck that can produce mana are now in play. And so what this is going to do is, first of all, hopefully our opponent doesn't have a removal spell. But our opponent's going to go down to 2, and this Bitter Blossom is now a win condition for us. So our opponent's own Bitter Blossom could win us the game. So I'm actually just going to go ahead and Mishra's Bauble, target our opponent, so land on top. Okay. So we're kind of all in on this plan of we could either win off of our opponent's Bitter Blossom at this point, or we can also draw a burn spell. So we have Tarfire, we have Call Against Man, we have Collective Brutality, which we just drew. Now, we do have to be aware of and remember that our opponent does have that Spell Snare in hand still. So something like a Mistbind Click, that would actually be probably or Cryptic Command. Those are the types of cards that our opponent could have. Going to be Collective Brutality. So that's going to, an Inquisition, that's going to take away our Collective Brutality. But our opponent actually needs to be able to get their own Bitter Blossom off the table. And there's a land, so that land is not going to be relevant, but we'll just hope that this Bitter Blossom is going to end the game for us. And it looks like it is, because this trigger is going on the stack. So, yep, that's going to do it. And that was the turn where the Ancestral was going to resolve. So, pretty fortunate timing there to be able to win the game against the Fairy deck. But that involved playing to our outs. We knew we needed to draw a Traverse or a Death Shadow. Drew one in the nick of time. And I actually think, looking back on that game, maybe I should have shocked myself for the Godless Shrine earlier to make the Death Shadow bigger, even though we didn't have the Death Shadow at the time. That was one of our outs. So unclear to me if that was necessarily right, because our opponent would have been pressuring us with Fairy Rogues, assuming we didn't draw the Death Shadow right away. So in terms of sideboarding for this matchup, I definitely like the Ranger of Eos. Liliana the Last Hope, I think that's actually better in many ways than the Liliana of the Veils here, because we can just answer the continuous stream of Fairy Rogues by plussing our Liliana the Last Hope. So other cards we may want to look at, Lingering Souls is a way for us to fight in the air. Collective Brutality, it's pretty good. Not great, so we can take cards like a Cryptic Command, like a counterspell, but there's not that many annoying threats our opponent has. So I think, and then similarly to Fatal Push, so these are like, and Tarfire, so we've got a little bit too much removal in our deck. So we're going to take out some of this removal, taking out Fatal Pushes. And I think a card like Collective Brutality is better in this matchup. And I also think we want these Lingering Souls to be able to fight in the air with our opponent. So a card like Tarfire, we can probably shave one of those. So let's go ahead and try this. I have not played this matchup at all previously, but so here we're on the draw with a 1-lander. Okay, sometimes you do have to keep 1-landers in this deck. However, we do not have a Street Wraith. We do not have a Mishra's Bauble. What we do have is 2 discard spells, a Traverse, so that if we do draw a land that can produce green, then we can Traverse, get another land. So this is actually a hand that I think it's a close decision. Quite a close decision. I am going to keep it. I'm someone that likes to make loose keeps. We can call them loose, but I think that this is a solid keep because we're on the draw. Would never keep this on the play in a million years, but we have the discard spell to potentially get a Bitter Blossom out of our opponent's hand. Even if we brick on our next turn, we can just Thoughtseize our opponent, and we see now a ton of discard for out of our opponent's hand, so we'll kind of have to see how this game transpires. There's a Mana Leak. There is... So it looks like our opponent, the Secluded Glen, is going to come into play tapped, most likely, on our opponent's next turn. So both of these are land-light hands, notably so. So, to me, because we see a bunch of discard from our opponent, it's between the Go for the Throat and the Mana Leak. I'm going to go with the Mana Leak. And the reason why I'm doing that is our endgame here is Lingering Souls. So, if our opponent strips away everything but the Lingering Souls out of our hand, which is basically what seems like is going to happen, we're going to need to resolve these Lingering Souls, and a card like Go for the Throat is not going to match up well against Flying Spirits. So it looks like our opponent just found a swamp off the top. So even though we don't have a lot of action, our opponent has 0 action in hand as well. So this is going to be a game of fighting card for card. Our opponent probably should take the Traverse out of our hand now, leaving us with the Goyf and the Death Shadow. But I think there's an argument for any of these 3 cards, being the Shadow, the Goyf, and the Traverse. But notably, if we draw a Mishra's Bauble or a Street Wraith here, not as good as a land, but those also give us redraws. So our opponent did take the Traverse. Makes sense. And so there's a land. Okay, so that's what we wanted. And we have the option of playing the Tarmogoyf. However, we definitely need the Godless... We need Godless Shrine for sure. Bloodstained Mire is one of the fetch lands that can fetch the Godless Shrine. Not all of our lands can. So if we play the Goyf, that can just get hit by the Go for the Throat that we already know about in our opponent's hand. So I actually just like passing the turn here. We can play a little bit of a waiting game, not in a huge rush. If we draw another land, we're going to be able to cast Lingering Souls. Now our opponent could help us out if they wanted to and just discard one of our Lingering Souls. Probably not going to happen, of course. That would not make any sense. So it's going to be a Goyf. Okay. And I'm not going to crack the fetch land because we want to draw a land. So having one less land in our deck is not good. And Death Shadow, not at all what we wanted. So, one of these weird games. Alright, Blood Crypt. So, we finally found our third land. And, by the way, this really rewards not having sacrificed that Bloodstained Mire for a green land, because then we wouldn't... The Blood Crypt is not a way for us to find a Godless Shrine, so we needed to use that Bloodstained Mire to get the Godless Shrine. So it looks like Lingering Souls has resolved, which is good news. So our hand is really starting to look a lot better. It didn't look great when we only had one land. Definitely will admit that. But now, knowing that our opponent just has a Go for the Throat and 2 other cards, I think we're in a pretty solid position. And this Mishra's Bauble is going to turn on Delirium. So before doing anything, I want to just see what our opponent's going to draw. So it is going to be a fetch land. And leading on Lingering Souls here, rather than flashing one back, makes the most sense, because for all we know, our opponent could have Remand in their deck, and we don't want to get flashback a Lingering Souls into a Remand. So this Street Wraith is going to mean we're a lot closer to being able to get these Death Shadows into play, even though it's not that big of a deal if we get them into play, because we already know that our opponent has at least one removal spell for them. So we're much more likely to win the game on the back of Spirits than Death Shadows, actually. And that's the reason why these Lingering Souls are in the deck, is in large part for matchups like this. So our opponent's actually firing up a Creeping Tar Pit, which is interesting. So that's actually a way of encouraging these Death Shadows to get played, because now we can play them. Our opponent's got 3 cards in hand. So one of the cards we have to really be worried about is Damnation. That could be one of the ways we could definitely lose the game, but still going to cycle a Street Wraith. Found another one. So we know we're going to attack here for 4. That's not a question. That is going to happen. And now the question is, how do we proceed? I think I actually like just flashing back both Lingering Souls in the graveyard. We're definitely going to take the 2 off the Stomping Grounds. Now, this is going to force us to go down to 8, which is pretty dangerous. So there's an argument to just dumping our 2 Death Shadows and flashing back Lingering Souls, and just saying, alright, if our opponent has Damnation, we're just going to lose the game here. Or we can go flashback both Lingering Souls. If our opponent has Damnation, we're still in a bad spot, because then our opponent also has Go for the Throat for at least one of these Death Shadows. So I think we just want to move in here, essentially. And just play out these Death Shadows. And another card that our opponent may have here is Cryptic Command, to try to stall out this game. But we can't really afford to just not do anything. We have to put some more pressure on the board. And interesting, our opponent's shocking off this Watery Grave. So this could be a removal spell for one of the Death Shadows, which it's not the end of the world, if that's the case. So it's a Murderous Cut. Okay. One of the Death Shadows is gone. Now a Go for the Throat can take care of another one. So this is coming down to a race where we're ahead, but hard to say what's in our opponent's hand. We know about one removal spell, and that's it. So now that we have the 5th land, we could actually hard cast a Street Wraith. So that's not a play you see very often. And we'll see if we want to do that, but we definitely want to think twice about cycling the Street Wraith. Alright, so there's a go for the throat. That makes sense. So we'll see if our opponent just takes the 6 here. So our opponent just took 6 damage. That's a lot of damage to take, dropping our opponent all the way down to 3. So there's not really a good reason to make another play. Our opponent could have Vendilion Click, though. So if our opponent has an end of turn Vendilion Click, then attacks us for 3, and follows that up with a Cryptic Command, that would be pretty annoying. I think we just passed the turn here. So, it could be a Vendilion Click. Okay, it's going to be a Spell Stutter Sprite. That's a lot worse than a Vendilion Click in this spot. So our opponent's still dead in the air. Basically needs a Cryptic Command in order to tap our creatures and then try to live another turn. Or some sort of mass removal spell. Something like an Engineered Explosives could be a card in our opponent's deck. The turn's getting passed. There's a Collective Brutality, okay. Maybe now regretting having played out that Forest on the last turn a little bit. So there's the Cryptic, okay, sure. Our opponent just picked up another card. We don't actually want this Street Wraith that much, so I think just duressing our opponent and having our opponent lose some life is where we want to go here. Although this could run into a Spell Snare. It's certainly within our opponent's range, but it just looks like 2 lands, so we just have to dodge 1 draw step. Not gonna flash back the Lingering Souls there. Our opponent's down to 1, and that's gonna be the